J. Blige didn't just sing about pain. She made it a movement, turned Project Hallways and toxic love into anthems that saved millions of women who'd never had someone speak their truth out loud. Back in '92, when Puff was still just a hungry A&R with a vision, Mary became the blueprint. The girl from Yonkers whose voice over hip-hop beats invented a whole new lane and made the industry billions. But while the world was calling her the queen of hip-hop soul, she was dying inside, battling addiction, depression, and men who saw her as product more than person. The same machine that built her tried to break her. Bad charity deals that landed her in court, a Burger King chicken ad that turned her into a punchline, a divorce that drained her bank account and forced her to pay alimony to the man who was supposed to protect her, and a complicated bond with Diddy that looked like love but came with a price tag she's still counting.
It's the same question all over and over again. I hate that.
So what's the one question that nobody has asked you that you want them to ask?
I don't want them to ask me anything. So don't ask me.
Oh, okay. So you'd rather not do the interview at all?
I'd rather not.
Huh.
Most artists don't survive that kind of public unraveling. But Mary didn't just survive. She turned every scar into a new chapter, from Oscar nominations to sold-out arenas at 54. This is the story of the woman who sang real love while searching for it herself, and what it cost her to finally find peace.
There's only one Mary J. Blige. So they can run out and get how many girls, how many girl groups, and turn their hat backwards and fix their hair like mine, but they'll never be me.
The peace came later, much later. First, there was Yonkers. Mary Jane Blige was born January 11th, 1971, in the Bronx, but it was the Schlobohm housing projects in Yonkers where she really grew up, where the fluorescent stairwell lights flickered at night and the walls were thin enough to hear everything. She heard women screaming as they ran from men with fists, arguments that ended in sirens, the kind of violence that becomes background noise when you're too young to process it as trauma. Her parents separated when she was small, and at 5 years old, Mary was abused, an assault that planted shame so deep she'd spend decades trying to drown it. She didn't have the language for what happened to her back then, didn't have anyone telling her it wasn't her fault, so she carried it in silence, let it fester, let it shape the way she saw herself and the world. By her teenage years, Mary had found her own numbing agents: alcohol, drugs, boys who didn't stay, anything to quiet the noise in her head. But while other girls were just surviving, Mary had something they didn't: a voice that could crack concrete. She sang in the projects, sang at family gatherings, sang anywhere someone would let her, and when she opened her mouth, people stopped moving. It wasn't technique, it was survival dressed up as melody, pain that had learned to harmonize with itself. Around 1988, still a teenager with more scars than hope, Mary walked into a karaoke booth at the Galleria Mall in White Plains and recorded herself singing Anita Baker's Caught Up in the Rapture. It was a cheap recording, the kind you'd make on a dare or to kill time before the food court, and she probably didn't think twice about it. But her stepfather's friend knew someone, Jeff Red, an A&R at Uptown Records, and that cassette tape ended up on his desk. When Red pressed play, he heard raw power wrapped in teenage ache, the kind of voice that doesn't come from vocal coaches or church training, but from living through things you shouldn't have to live through. That tape made its way to Andre Harrell, the CEO of Uptown Records, and he didn't hear a polished pop star. He heard a girl with nothing to lose and everything to prove, which in the music business is the most dangerous and valuable combination you can find. By 1991, that voice had a contract. Uptown Records signed Mary J. Blige not as a singer who needed fixing, but as raw material that just needed the right frame. And Andre Harrell knew exactly who could build it. A hungry, relentless A&R named Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Barely in his 20s, but already moving through the industry like he owned it. Puff had vision, the kind that didn't just hear hits, but saw entire movements. And when he looked at Mary, He didn't see another R&B girl waiting for her turn. He saw Revolution dressed in Timberlands and door-knocker earrings, the female voice of the streets that nobody had figured out how to bottle yet. The plan was simple but radical. Take Mary's church-trained, gut-deep alto and lay it over the hard, head-nodding beats that were blowing up in hip-hop. No softening her edges, no cleaning up her pain. Just let her be exactly who she was, a project girl with a voice that could shatter glass and mend hearts in the same breath. Puff became her executive producer, her image architect, her creative director, the man who controlled everything from the samples to the styling. He dressed her in leather and denim, gave her blonde highlights and a look that said hood and haute at the same time, and made sure every visual screamed authenticity even as it was being carefully constructed in conference rooms and photo shoots. In the studio, Puff was everywhere, pacing behind the board, throwing out ideas, pushing Mary to dig deeper even when she was already bleeding through the mic. He had her singing over beats that sampled everything from Audio 2 to Teddy Pendergrass, creating a sonic world where hip-hop and soul weren't cousins but twins born in the same bass line. And Mary, still carrying all that Yonkers trauma in her chest, poured every ounce of her unresolved pain into those sessions. She wasn't performing emotion, she was exorcising it. July 1992. What's the 411? Hit the world, and it didn't ask permission. Singles like Real Love and You Remind Me dominated R&B radio, climbed the charts, and introduced a whole generation to something they didn't have a name for yet: hip-hop soul. The album went triple platinum, moved millions of units, and turned Mary J. Blige into the blueprint every label would try to copy for the next decade. Years later, Puff would say Mary changed music by bringing the real-life stories of women from the projects over hard hip-hop beats. And he wasn't exaggerating. She didn't just open a door, she kicked it off the hinges. But success at that speed comes with a price tag, and Mary was already learning the terms. Those cracks became songs. November 1994, and Mary was back in the studio with Puff, but this time the air felt heavier, the stakes more desperate. What's the 411 had made her a star, but the follow-up would determine whether she was built to last or just another one-album wonder. The sessions for My Life weren't celebrations, they were exorcisms. Picture it: a Manhattan studio late at night, thick with weed smoke and takeout containers, Roy Ayers samples looping on repeat like a heartbeat that wouldn't quit. Mary was in the vocal booth, headphones pressed tight against her ears, trying to sing through a fog of depression so dense she could barely see the other side. Puff was on the other side of the glass, pounding the talkback button, pushing her for another take, even when her voice was already cracking from the weight of what she was trying to say. She wasn't performing pain, she was documenting it in real time. Every line about toxic love, every confession about wanting to die, every plea for someone to see her as more than damaged goods. It was all real, all raw, all Mary. Years later, listening back to My Life, she would say she heard a woman dying inside, but still trying to give people hope, and that's exactly what the album became when it dropped. It sold around 3 million copies in the US, but the numbers don't capture what it meant to the women who played it on repeat in their cars, in their bedrooms, in moments when they needed proof that someone else understood. My Life became a survival guide, a diary that millions of Black women could see themselves in, and it cemented Mary as more than a singer. She was a witness, a truth teller, someone brave enough to bleed in public so others didn't have to bleed alone. But the machine doesn't stop for grief. By 1997, Mary was ready to step out from under Puff's shadow, and Share My World became her declaration of independence. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, her first time topping the main albums chart without Puff's direct oversight, and the message was clear: she could carry her own weight. 4 years later, Family Affair gave her something she'd been chasing since the beginning, her first #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100. Produced by Dr. Dre, it was a club anthem that proved Mary could make people dance even while she was still fighting demons. Then came the breakthrough, December 2005, and Mary released what would become her magnum opus, an album so perfectly titled it felt prophetic. It sold over 7 million copies worldwide, spawned the eternal ballad Be Without You, and earned her 8 Grammy nominations at the 2007 ceremony, the most of any artist that year. She took home 3 trophies, including Best R&B Album, and stood on that stage looking like royalty, like vindication wrapped in a gown. In 2008, she co-headlined a massive arena tour with Jay-Z, becoming one of hip-hop and R&B's top-grossing live acts, playing to sold-out crowds who knew every word, every ad-lib, every moment she'd given them over the years. On paper, Mary J. Blige was untouchable, but paper doesn't show the cost. The irony is that success didn't save her, it just gave her more places to hide. By the mid-1990s, the partnership that had built Mary's empire was starting to crack under its own weight. Puff was still in her orbit, still executive producing My Life, but the chemistry between them was souring. Creative tensions mixing with personal chaos, his frustration with her lifestyle colliding with her resentment of his control. Picture a backstage corridor after a high-energy show, crews and hangers-on crowding the narrow hall, the bass from the after-party thumping through the walls. Mary is visibly exhausted, maybe high, sweat still drying on her skin, and Puff is pacing, talking business when all she wants is silence. An argument erupts about direction, about discipline, about what she owes him versus what she owes herself. And in that moment, you can see the future splitting in two. Mary was free from Puff's direct oversight, but freedom without foundation is just another kind of freefall. She later admitted in interviews that during those years, she was self-medicating with alcohol, drugs, and destructive relationships. Anything to numb the childhood pain that success couldn't heal. The girl who'd been abused at 5, who'd grown up hearing women scream in project hallways, was now a millionaire with platinum records and Grammy statues. But the trauma was still living rent-free in her body. December 2003, and Mary made a decision that would define the next decade of her life. She married Martin Kendu Isaacs at her New Jersey home, a beautiful ceremony with candles and gospel arrangements of her own songs. But Kendu wasn't just her partner, he was her manager, which meant business and love were now tangled in the same contract. For over a decade, Kendu would control not just her heart, but her finances, her schedule, her decisions, her day-to-day operations. And Mary, still carrying all that unresolved trauma, handed him the keys willingly. By 2011, she was trying to give back. Mary co-founded the Foundation for the Advancement of Women Now, FFAWN, with music executive Steve Stout, a charity meant to empower women through education and support. It was a noble vision, the kind of legacy move that successful artists make when they want to be remembered for more than hit records. But noble visions need infrastructure, oversight, people who know how to manage money and compliance, and somewhere in the gap between intention and execution, things started to slip. April 2012, and the first bomb was a commercial, a Burger King ad where Mary J. Blige, the woman who'd turned pain into platinum and survived every kind of industry betrayal, stood on a soundstage surrounded by kids in paper crowns and sang enthusiastically about chicken wraps. The set was bright, artificial, the kind of lighting that shows every doubt on your face, and Mary was doing her best to sell it, smiling, hitting her marks, delivering lines about crispy chicken like it was just another gig. But somewhere between the shoot and the edit, someone at Burger King decided not to release it officially. Instead, it leaked online, and within hours, Black Twitter had seen it, dissected it, and delivered a verdict. This was embarrassing. This was beneath her. This felt like minstrelsy dressed up as marketing. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Burger King pulled the ad, citing vague music licensing issues. But the damage was done. Mary had spent 2 decades building a legacy rooted in dignity and authenticity. And now she was a punchline, a meme, the subject of think pieces about racial stereotypes and artists who'd lost their way. She later told radio host Angie Martinez that when she first saw the leaked video online, her heart sank. She started sweating, and she felt crushed, like she'd betrayed her own people, mocked her own culture, sold out in the most public way possible. She called the whole thing a mistake and asked fans for forgiveness, but the internet doesn't forgive easily. Then came the lawsuits. May 2012, barely a month after the chicken ad fiasco, and TD Bank filed a $250,000 lawsuit against Mary's foundation, FFAWN, for defaulting on a loan taken just a year earlier. Reports started surfacing about unpaid musicians from a 2011 charity gala, missing donations, and failure to file proper tax returns. The foundation that was supposed to empower women was now being exposed as mismanaged at best, potentially fraudulent at worst, and Mary's name was all over it. The press had a field day. Headlines called it a charity sham, questioned where the money went, and painted Mary as either negligent or complicit. She fought back publicly, blaming poor infrastructure, saying she didn't have the right people in the right places doing the right things. But the explanation sounded hollow when the bank was demanding $250,000. In September 2013, FFAWN finally reached a settlement with TD Bank, knocking $200,000 off the debt and agreeing to a structured repayment plan. But the reputation hit was permanent. And as if that wasn't enough, news broke between May 2012 and February 2013 that Mary was facing a nearly $900,000 tax lien on her New Jersey mansion. The queen of hip-hop soul, the woman who'd sold millions of records and headlined arenas with Jay-Z, was being framed in the media as broke, mismanaged, out of control. Every headline was another cut, every blog post another reminder that the world loves to build you up just to watch you crumble. The watching didn't stop, it just shifted from curiosity to judgment, and then, eventually, to something closer to pity. For a few years after the scandals, Mary kept working, kept releasing music, kept showing up. But the shine had dimmed, and everyone could feel it. Behind the scenes, the marriage that was supposed to be her foundation was rotting from the inside out. By July 2016, after 13 years of vows and business entanglements, Mary J. Blige filed for divorce from Kendu Isaacs, citing irreconcilable differences in paperwork that couldn't capture the full weight of what irreconcilable actually meant. Kendu didn't go quietly. Court filings showed he was seeking nearly $130,000 a month in spousal support, a number so staggering it made headlines all over again. A judge eventually ordered $30,000 temporarily, but the damage was done. Suddenly, the world knew exactly how much her marriage was costing her. She later described the divorce as hell, ugly, public, and nasty, saying she had to fight for her life, her dignity, her sanity, all over again. This was the man she'd trusted with her career, the one who sat in on studio sessions and tour planning, who knew her finances better than she did, and now he was across a courtroom table asking for a check every month just to go away. But Mary had learned something in all those years of turning pain into platinum. The studio doesn't judge you, it just holds space for whatever you need to say. So that's where she went. February 2017, and Strength of a Woman hit the world, an album born from fury, financed by betrayal, and written in the margins of divorce paperwork. She told the New York Post that paying alimony every single day made her so angry she had to channel it somewhere, and what came out was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. The album wasn't a comeback in the traditional sense, it was a reckoning. She wasn't asking for sympathy or trying to win a PR battle. She was just telling the truth the only way she knew how, and that honesty became the foundation for the Strength of a Woman Festival and Summit, a whole new platform built on the wreckage of what almost destroyed her. And the studio led her somewhere she never expected. Hollywood was watching. November 2017, just months after Strength of a Woman dropped, and Mary J. Blige walked onto red carpets for an entirely different reason. Netflix had premiered Mudbound, a searing Jim Crow-era drama directed by Dee Reese, and Mary wasn't there as a singer promoting a soundtrack. She was there as Florence Jackson, a sharecropper's wife who carried generations of pain in her eyes. She'd stripped away everything that made her Mary J. Blige, the Queen. No wigs, no lashes, no armor. Just raw vulnerability, and the kind of acting that makes you forget you're watching someone perform. When the Academy Award nominations came through in early 2018, Mary made history. 2 nominations for the same film, Best Supporting Actress and Best Original Song, making her the first person ever nominated for both acting and songwriting for a single movie. She didn't win the Oscars, but she won something more valuable: respect in a new arena, proof that her artistry wasn't confined to one lane. The acting roles kept coming. By 2020, she'd landed a starring role as Monet Tejada in Starz' Power Book 2, Ghost, playing a ruthless drug queenpin with the same intensity she'd brought to Florence Jackson, and the show became one of the network's most-watched series. June 2021 brought a different kind of validation. Amazon released Mary J. Blige's My Life, a documentary that revisited the creation and impact of her 1994 masterpiece, with Mary herself sitting down to explain what it felt like to record an album while dying inside. It wasn't a puff piece, it was a reckoning, a chance for her to contextualize the pain, own the survival, and let a new generation understand what hip-hop soul actually cost the woman who invented it. And then came the ultimate stamp, October 2024, and Mary J. Blige was announced as a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 2024 induction class. November of that same year, she released Gratitude, her 15th studio album, and launched a 40-city arena tour with Neo and Mario called For My Fans, celebrating not just the music, but the people who'd held her down through every scandal, every divorce filing, every headline that tried to write her off. In interviews promoting the tour, she said she was living in a constant state of gratitude now, healthy, working, surrounded by people she trusted, finally at peace. But writing your own story also means reckoning with the people who tried to write it for you. As Mary was mounting her 2025 For My Fans tour, selling out 40 arenas across the country and celebrating gratitude with crowds who still knew every word to songs she wrote decades ago, another story was unfolding in the news. Sean "Diddy" Combs, the man who'd executive produced her first 2 albums and helped invent the blueprint that made her a star, was facing a reckoning of his own. Lawsuits piling up, allegations of and dominating headlines, a pattern of violence and control that stretched back decades. Suddenly, people were revisiting the bad boy era with new eyes, asking harder questions about who held power and who paid the price for it. Mary's name came up in those conversations, specifically in a 2003 lawsuit filed by former bad boy president Kirk Burroughs, who claimed Combs had intimidated Mary into dropping him as her manager back in 2001. Diddy denied the allegations, calling them complete fantasy, and the case was ultimately dismissed because it was filed too late under the statute of limitations, meaning a judge never ruled on the merits. But the claim itself, that Mary's business decisions were being shaped under pressure from a more powerful male executive, added a darker layer to the origin story everyone thought they knew. How much of her early success was collaboration, and how many choices were hers? Mary has never publicly accused Diddy of the kind of abuse detailed in the recent lawsuits against him, and their public statements about each other have remained respectful, even affectionate. But the renewed scrutiny around his alleged behavior forces a harder look at the dynamics that shaped her career in those formative years. The A&R who controlled her sound, her image, her narrative, and the young woman with so much trauma, she didn't yet have the tools to protect herself. What makes Mary's story different is that she survived it all. The Puff years, the addiction, the bad deals, the public humiliation, the divorce that tried to bankrupt her emotionally and financially. And she's still here, still working, still relevant. Her music is finding new life on streaming platforms and TikTok, where Gen Z is discovering My Life and The Breakthrough as comfort albums for their own pain. She's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, headlining arenas, acting in prestige projects, and living, by her own account, in a constant state of gratitude. That's the lesson. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to let the fall be the end of the story. Mary J. Blige didn't just survive the industry, she outlasted it. And in a world that tried to write her ending a dozen times, she's still the one holding the pen.